This is episode 388 of Jumble Think.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Jumble Think, where we interview dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers all about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's show is Fergie Philippe. More about Fergie in a moment. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, if you've never subscribed to Jumble Think, now's the time to do it. Head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts, search for Jumble Think, and click subscribe. To make it even easier, if you head on over to jumblethink.com, you'll find links to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and more. Never miss an episode of Jumble Think. Go and subscribe now. Now let's join today's conversation. Hey there, friends. Welcome to Jumble Think. My name's Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have an incredible conversation lined up for you today. It is great to see the world reopen, that people are living again, whether it's going to see a concert or going out to dinner or just living life with the friends around them. It is great to see things reopen. One of those things that recently reopened is Broadway. And nothing has been bigger in the world of Broadway than the hit show Hamilton. Our guest today, Fergie Philippe, currently stars on the Broadway version of Hamilton as Hercules, Mulligan, and James Madison. Beyond that, during the COVID pandemic, he was looking for creative outlets. He created a brand new podcast called It's Time to Meet the Muppets, all about Jim Henson's Muppets and their arrival to Disney+. This is a great conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it. Let's go ahead and join today's conversation with today's guest, Fergie Philippe. Welcome to Jumble Think.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited. I met you, 2.5-3 weeks ago, I think, on a Friday.
Yeah.
At PodMax with our friend Josh Carey.
What a great guy.
Yeah, great guy. Great program that they're doing. Great event. I'm excited to be chatting with you for two reasons. One, Broadway's awesome. I love New York City. Yes. And two, the Muppets. A little known secret on my bucket list. One of the things I want to do is actually get on to the Charlie Chaplin Studios, which is now the Jim Henson Studios.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, what a history there.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And they have paid such tribute to all of the different, Charlie Chaplin-esque things. And Brian Henson, who's the son of Jim Henson, who is now the chairman of the company. There's a video he did recently where he was on set. I think it was for Disney. They were going behind the scenes of Earth to Ned, which is on Disney+. And he was talking about all these different things within the studios of like, well, Charlie Chaplin did this here and did this here and did this. And you're right. There's so much rich history over there. You can actually go visit them. You probably know this, but you can visit them through Adventures by Disney, through their SoCal program. I was supposed to do that actually a couple years ago. And then, time got away from me and I couldn't, but yeah.
Yeah, I know how that is. One of the highlights of my life was I'm a big fan of a show called Chuck with Zachary Levi. And I got to go onto the studio, check out the sets and all that kind of stuff. Studios are one of those working weird places where there's a lot of magic, but there's also a lot of uniqueness about that world, and it's just fun to explore that. As I'm sure as we talk about Broadway, there's a lot of unique fun things that most people don't realize, and a lot of work. You see the behind the scenes, the prep.
Absolutely,
that's just crazy. Other accolade other than the podcast that you have called It's Time to Meet the Muppets, but you also are in Hamilton as Hercules, Mulligan, and also James Madison. Wow. A lot of ground to cover in a short period of time.
Yeah.
I love our show's all about dreams and ideas. It's about people who took something that was a passion and turned it into much more than just a passion. They maybe turned into a career or a book or a message. I want to rewind a little bit before we dive into what you're doing now in the last couple of years and where you're going in the future. I want to take and hear a little bit about your journey into the creative arts, into acting, into Broadway.
Oh, yeah.
How did you even get there?
Funny, that we're bringing up Muppets because I kind of came to the arts through puppetry. I grew up watching Sesame Street and the Muppets and Fraggle Rock and all of these different Jim Henson programs, and they were so important to me, and not even just about artistically, but I think so much of who I am as a human being is really inspired by a lot of those shows. And I was really taken by the craftsmanship of the puppets. I think that the colors and the fur and the designs I thought were so incredible. Specifically, animals design was something that fascinated me for many, many years. When I was a kid, there was something about the way he looked and the way the colors meshed together. I think the Electric Mayhem in general, there's such a crazy variety of looks and sizes and colors, and it just really was like, what is happening on my screen? Like it was psychedelic in a different way for me, and I think I just always kind of naturally kind of drew to that. And eventually, when I was watching Sesame Street, I saw Ernie's subsleeve, and I realized, oh, these are people doing this. This isn't real. And I think a lot of kids have the moment of they're not real, and then they freak out. But for me, it was, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I was and I was young, but I was that's really incredible that there are people who are making this happen. And so, I did my little research, and, I fully became obsessed.
So was it Sesame Street that started this journey for you, or was it some of the other Muppets? I grew up I was born 81, so I grew up with Muppet Babies and with the old school Muppet show where you have the curtain and all that kind of stuff. And I know that was around in the 90s. I know that's still around today. Disney Plus is bringing back all the entire library. What was that? Do you have a memory where you go, I first remember seeing X Muppet or X Muppet show, and it was like a spark where it was like, I'm drawn to this. I don't know why, but I like it.
No, I don't actually have a first memory, but what I do know is that some of my earliest memories involve Sesame Street. Like when I was 2 or 3, I have the most insane VHS collection. I think I rival anybody, because I would argue to say I have about 35 VHSs of Sesame Street alone. Every special that's ever existed, every compilation, in the 90s especially. I mean, the home video market was so big for Sesame Street. It was almost part of their shooting season. It was like they shot the season and then they shot a bunch of home videos, and I owned every single one. And so, and especially for me, because my parents, part of it was that they were like, if I'm ever acting up or if I'm ever crying when I was a baby, it's like, if you put in a VHS, he'll be quiet, he'll be fine, it'll be straight. And so I think that all of my memories kind of come from that. And then what's funny about Muppets is that my earliest memories with Muppets are actually their sing-along tapes. They had a series of sing-along tapes. There was only 3 or maybe 4. But there was a Muppet Treasure Island sing-along tape that they had. And, excuse me, and that was, I think that was the key into the world of the Muppets, because Kermit has a lot of great crossover between Sesame Street and the Muppets. And I think that's where I followed it to. I think that's how I ended up getting into who the Muppets were, because then I discovered all the movies. Then I discovered the TV show. Then I discovered the specials and all of that stuff. And so it definitely started with Sesame Street. But I think in general, I grew up in a time in the 90s when it was Puppet Central on all children's television. There was, Puzzle Place, and there was Between the Lines, there was Sesame Street, there was Gullah Gullah Island, there was, even Barney as the soup performer. That kind of world of puppetry, bodysuit performing, I think has always kind of struck a chord with me that was really deep.
So before you were actor, before you were a singer, before you were a performer, was it puppetry that was what that obviously is the gateway, but was that the first outlet for you creatively that you explored?
I really think it was. It was one of those things where one of my other earliest puppet memories was the first time I bought a DVD of the Muppet Show, and it was when Time Life released the 25th anniversary DVDs, and I got the Paul Simon Star Wars and Raquel Welch DVD, And what I remember, I made a kind of a faux sock puppet where I had the sock, and I used to have this like toy monkey that had a leather jacket. I removed the leather jacket, put it on the sock, attached pencils to the to where the arms of the jacket were to use as rods, and I would just like lip sync to all of the different songs that were on that DVD incessantly, to the point where I broke the DVD. So I have, and I did a lot of other things like that. I gutted stuffed animals and I turned them into puppets and things like that. And so that was really my first creative outlet. And I think that at that time, you know, I had resources in terms of information, but there wasn't a lot of stuff on how to build puppets and things like that. So I kind of strayed away from that because all of the puppets that I had weren't like them. They were kind of these like really bad version of puppets. And I was like, well, it's not the real thing and they're too expensive to get the real thing. So I think I ended up shifting into theater in that way, because I also was a huge movie kid and I only bought DVDs and VHSs to get the behind the scenes featurettes. And I loved watching those different things of being on set and filming. And so I think that's how the transition to acting obviously came a little bit more naturally, but that's where I think that connection ended up being made.
You know, for me, I'm listening to your story and I find it fascinating for multiple reasons. I look at my own journey. I look back and it was like this innate sense of curiosity that drove my journey. It sounds like for you, you were able to, in the consuming, the watching of this content, actually envision yourself in it in a unique way. Whereas I think a lot of people see it and they consume the content, they watch it, they go, this is great. And then they're like, I'm going to go ride my bike now. And they don't think about like putting themselves in that story. Were you at a young age seeing yourself like, this could be me? I could be doing this.
Weirdly, yes. And I don't know why. I think, and it needs to be understood, I was probably like 7 or 8 when I discovered that there were puppeteers under all of these characters. Like when I first read about Jim Henson, I was a child, like in the third and fourth grade.
Yeah.
And every day when I came home from school, I was on Muppet Wiki for hours, like truly hours. And I was on Muppet Central reading articles and interviews with these different performers. And I think it was more that I was so captivated by what they were doing. It was just such a different way of living. I was like, I can't imagine people who do this for a living, but I don't want to do anything else. I think that I don't know where that kind of connection came from, but it was one of those things where I was like, well, if you can just be a Muppet for your life, for your like your job, why? And I still feel that way now, where I don't understand. I've gotten back into puppetry and, you know, I've gotten to talk to some people, which has been really amazing. And it shocks me how small the community is. I'm like, why aren't there more people wanting to be Muppets? Like it's genuinely something that I still can't compute. Because it makes sense to me. It's very second nature to me, this idea of like, obviously, if I have the option to play Big Bird's cousin, great, I will go do that.
Yeah.
And it's always been like that. And I can't really think in another regard. So I don't even know if it's that like I saw myself in it. It was just more like, well, duh. Like, obviously, like this is the greatest cheat of all time. I can get paid to just be a pig, a goat, a frog. You know what I mean? And I still can't really separate that.
Yeah. I'm going to ask kind of an off the wall question as we kind of pivot a little bit, and then we're going to pivot back here. If you were asked, they always have celebrities, they have people from Broadway, they have actors and musicians and authors on Sesame Street. If you were to get the phone call from Sesame Street and they were to say, Fergie, we love you. We love your show. We love that you're doing this Muppets podcast. We want to have you on. And they were to say, you can either come on as a puppeteer and have a character that we create for you, you create with us, and you get to be a Muppet in Sesame Street, on Muppet, any of the other Jim Henson IP, or you can come on as yourself as a guest and represent yourself on the show. Which one would you be drawn to?
I'm gonna puppeteer. I have zero desire for Fergie to get any kind of recognition or anything like that. I cannot express what a dream it would be for like to have my own character, or to even just like be in that space with all these other puppeteers. There are puppeteers who are working there that I've admired since I was a kid, and I have known their names and their histories and their entire resumes that are still working there. And I mean, just to be able to be in that space and watch them be the masters that they are would honestly just fill me with content. I'd probably call my agent and say, well, go ahead and get your last check, because like I'm gonna go ahead and tell the good Lord to take me at this point. Because that would, no, there's no question. I wouldn't even think about it. It would just be like, yeah, man, let's do the puppeteer thing. I'd probably leave theater, honestly. It's just like I think it's so exciting, and I think it's so interesting. And it's, again, like as I've been getting back into puppetry, it's been like, I just love it. It's so much work. It's such a tasking thing. But it's incredible. It's such an amazing art form.
Have your parents been supportive, or has your family as a whole been supportive of this journey? Because, you know, I have a belief that a lot of people choose not to do what they do because environment dictates that that's not socially acceptable. Like, dude, you can't be a puppeteer. Oh, you can't be on Broadway. You can't do that. You need a real job. No one makes it like that. And I think a lot of people, whether it's well-intended or not, their dreams somewhere along, and that's just one objection that they hear. There's many more and many experiences that they just go, I'm out. I can't do this. Obviously, everyone else knows I can't, so I can't.
Sure.
You have a supportive network around you that was like, dude, go for it.
Yeah, I definitely did. And maybe it wasn't actively just like go for it. Like, I think part of where I get the whole like it's just second nature to me is from my parents, because like I watched Sesame Street and Muppets so often that when I finally told them like I want to be in it, they were like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Like where else were you going to go? So I think it was more kind of like anything I do that was involved with performing was never like a shock to them.
Yeah.
There's always going to be worries. There's always going to be, you know, concerns about how are you going to eat, how are you going to live, and things like that. But, you know, I think what's been wonderful is that as my parents have, my mom specifically, as she saw my work ethic, I think she really took a big step back and was kind of just like, I'm just going to watch it unfold, you know, and that's the biggest blessing I really got from my parents, is that they were very actually uninvolved. It was a support system, but there was never any kind of overbearingness. There was never any kind of, you know, sense of, well, you have this number of years to do it, or you're going to go get another degree. Like, you know, there were all these different things that ultimately it was always my decision. It was always going to be up to me. And a lot of people who go into this business don't get that option because of, you know, fear of scarcity, fear of, you know, not being able to succeed, or being able to not even just succeed, but to earn a livable wage, which is a very difficult thing to do as a performer. I've been unbelievably lucky in that regard. And I recognize that. But, you know, so much of that I really think is because from a very young age, I had a sense of independency. And I think that's where my personality naturally leads itself to. But I also think my parents were very trusting and were very much like, no, if you know what you're doing, we're not going to step in. Just like tell us how we can help and support you. The puppetry thing kind of not died out, but it was around 10 or 11 when I kind of started shifting into acting. And I think part of it was more like I was even being practical. I just couldn't imagine. I just thought it's so funny when I think about it, because the road to becoming an actor definitely seemed harder in terms of like how much work I had to do. And that's not to say to become a puppeteer on Sesame Street, it's not equally as hard or a different kind of difficult, because it is, but there was so much more work to be done that I could see ahead of me. And there were a lot of different like camps and intensives, and I had to go to a performing arts high school. Then I went to a college, and then, you know, all of these different things. But with puppetry, it's a little bit more free flowing. You know, I think that so many of the Muppet performers who came to be now, you know, not when Jim was around, but more like who are coming up now, it's become they learn about it at a young age. They buy themselves a monitor. They make themselves their first puppet that can be camera ready. And they just practice for years and years and years. They make tapes. They send it to the company. They just practice as much as they can. And when the time comes, you know, they go to intensives, they go to different workshops and stuff, but there isn't as clear cut a path that's been made out for actors. And I think that's the reason I ended up going with acting, because I could see a path. I could see something like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And
there's a roadmap.
I keep following the steps. Yeah, exactly. And so I just think that's what ended up happening. And I think for my parents, the fact that they could see that I was like, well, I have to do this. And then, you know, in about 5 years, I'll do that. And then a few years, I'll do that. And I think they've always seen that I've always known where I was going to go next. And I think that's part of where the support and trust comes from. But also they're just, you know, my dad was an artistic person. He he wrote his own music, and he was very music involved. He had a radio show when I was younger. And my mom is very artistically inclined. She's a doctor, but she's very artistically, you know, her palette is impeccable, and I think my family in general is. And so I think that's where a lot of that comes from as well.
We're going to take a break right here, and in a moment we'll be back to continue our conversation with today's guest, Fergie Philippe. Because you're a listener of Jumblethink, I want to give you something very special. It's a free subscription to Podcast Magazine. So whether you like listening to podcasts or you're creating your own podcast, this is a great resource for you. Matter of fact, I even covered Fergie's podcast, It's Time to Meet the Muppets, in a recent article. All you have to do to get this free subscription is to head on over to podcastmagazine.com/free, where you can sign up for your free subscription. I'll put the links in the episode notes, along with links to the article I did on Fergie's podcast. Now let's jump back into today's conversation. Let's pivot into Broadway, because you have a very unique, was it an Amtrak experience, we could call it?
My gosh. The Greyhound.
Oh, Greyhound,
yes. Dude. I think about those days and I get so unbelievably anxious. I can't believe. And I was like, was I 21 at that point? Yeah, I was 21, but I was still in college. I was a kid, and it was just so basically what we're talking about is my audition process for the final, my audition process for the national tour of Hamilton started when I was in college. It was for the second national tour. It was in the spring of my senior year. And I met my agent around that time, and basically I got a couple of auditions, and I flew up to New York a couple times, but the issue was I was running out of money. This is where my sense of independency got the best of me. I was very prideful, and I didn't ask my mom for any help.
I think every college student, well, not every, but most college students, if they come from like a normal background, would say, you know, first year it seems so easy, and then you get to the end and you're just like, dude, I'm broke.
I have no money. The number of times where I was just like, wow, I wonder how I'm going to eat today. Well, maybe if I offer a free lesson, or if I offer blah, 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 I can get a meal out of it. You know, it was crazy how I would, how I would make things happen. But I picked up a job as the assistant to my, as the head of the musical theater program. I picked up a job, and I just worked like crazy and saved enough money to buy a round trip bus ticket, which was a 14-hour bus ride. Wow. From North Carolina. I had to leave the night before at 7 so that I could be in the city by 8 so that I could get to my audition at 10. And the unfortunate thing is that, like, when the bus, so I took 2 buses to get there, essentially. So you take one bus from North Carolina to Virginia, and then in the middle of, like, you know, the sticks of Virginia, they drop you off at this station, and they're like, okay, next bus comes in 3 hours, but it's 2 a.m. So it's like from 2 to 5, you're just in this like random bus stop with all of these different characters. And I'm like, I haven't slept. I need to sleep so that I can somewhat be rested before I get on this bus. And so I'm like tying my suitcase and my bag to my legs so that nobody steals it. And like I'm in a corner, kind of sleeping with like one eye open, but I also was like really struggling with mental health at that point and had a lot of anxiety that was not being treated. And so I was just like a vibrating mess.
Wow.
And so I woke up at 5 and I got on and I can't remember if I did that twice. I think I did it once. I want to say I did it once. Yeah, I did that once. And it was literally just because it was $70 round trip. And I was like, I can't afford that. And I guess I'm going to make it happen. And so to be honest, I don't even know if I ever told my mom, because I knew she would have freaked out if she knew that that's what I was doing. But yeah, I mean, and obviously it went in my favor because I was cast later that year. But yeah, craziness.
They don't pay you to come audition. That's the thing.
They
right?
do not pay you to come audition. You basically pay to go audition.
Yeah. Now, do you think they knew? Did you ever tell like the cast or anyone the story? Like, was this like a hidden secret that you had for like a long time? Like, hey, if you knew what it took for me to be here with you.
Oh, but you know what's funny though? Everybody has a story like that in our industry. That's at some point or another, somebody has a really insane story. And it doesn't end there for me, because then my final callback weekend in August, which was 4 months after that, was full of late flights and missing luggage and missed dance calls and, all of these different things. And so it's part of, and it sucks, but it's part of what you agree to as an actor. It's part of what you agree to in this industry. And I think we're having a lot of conversations actually right now, both with racial reckoning and both with the pandemic, on a financial model. Like, can we afford to keep doing this lifestyle anymore? Because is it worth actors breaking their bodies literally for an opportunity? What is the cost and what is the reward? Yeah. And I actually haven't thought about any of that stuff till really right now. And it's really genuinely insane, the stuff that I went through just to get that audition. But that is what we have hyped up Broadway to be, and what we've hyped up these opportunities to be. And when you look at Hamilton, it makes sense. Like, Hamilton's one of the craziest things that's ever existed in the zeitgeist of our culture. And so how else was I supposed to react? And for me, if anybody knows me, that show changed my life when it came out. It was a very profound moment when that show came out, because I was like, I understand my purpose right now as a performer. I was like, my purpose as a performer is to do work like that. And it's to do that show. And it really, there was never going to be any stopping me, honestly, especially at that point, because I was so obsessed and I was so driven to go be a part of that show that I was always going to do it like that. But, yeah, it's really interesting. Everybody has a kind of crazy story like that with their big break, or with their really, exciting resume credit, because many of us kind of had to do it that way to get there.
It's just part of the deal.
It's part of the deal, yeah.
Unless you have some kind of TV career and they book you so that they can fill seats.
And you just slide on in. But then you talk about the people that get into the TV career. I mean, it's just, everybody's been through it. And I also have to really check myself and recognize that it was difficult. It was short, though. It was short. There are people I know who got into Ham that had been auditioning the way I was auditioning on that bus stop for over 15 years before they got a gig like Ham. And that's dedication. That is commitment. That is drive. And that is passion for what you do. Yeah. So, it's all about perspective. It's all about humility and honesty, and I try my best to really adhere to that.
No, you did the national tour, and then you ended up back on actual Broadway doing it.
Yeah.
COVID knocked that
8 weeks later.
Oh my
knocked
goodness.
It right. Maybe 6 to 8 weeks. It might have been 6 weeks, but yeah, COVID knocked it right out.
So what happens after COVID, or when Broadway opens? Are you automatically like, hey, you're coming back, you're finishing your commitment, or is there a re-audition process? What's that look like?
Yes, we just found out basically that we will all be back.
That's awesome. The
process of how is still complicated, because they're trying to figure out rehearsals and things like that. And in terms of like how vaccinations are going to work and things like that. But we all are going to be coming back to our role should we choose to accept it. So that's very incredible, very grateful that, you know, the company is just being loyal to us and sticking to us in that way.
I'm going to let you in on a secret. I have never seen Hamilton. I've not seen it on Disney. I've not seen it in the theater. I had an office in Midtown Manhattan up till COVID.
Oh, wow.
And I'm holding out to see it in person. So I'm going to make this commitment right here. And you better hold me up to it.
All right.
When you are back, I will be there.
I will email you.
Okay.
I will email you the night of and say, where's your ticket? I will say, where are you?
And I'll send you a picture back and I'll say, I'm here. When are we grabbing coffee?
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Excellent. I will absolutely make sure.
Now, there's something unique. We could go into Hamilton and just the cultural impact, the artistic impact. It really was revolutionary in a Disney-fied Broadway.
Yep.
In a lot of ways. I mean, you got Lion King, you got Aladdin, you've got all of these great hits on Broadway, and you have lots of things outside of that.
Sure.
So I don't want to boil it down to something like, hey, it's become a cartoon of Disney on.
No. But like the magnitude.
Yeah.
That the IP has become is very much Disneyfied, 100%.
And so there was not like this. You look back at the history of Broadway, and there are these musicals, there are these plays that you just go, whoa. That was a shift in theater. Hamilton was was the most recent, like, what just happened? I don't get this. How did, like, it just exploded? And to be a part of that, that must be like storybook true for you. Yeah,
it's unbelievable because what Hamilton did for me as a performer is up until that point, I was preparing myself as a performer to play roles that in the musical theater world that were set in the Reconstruction era, that were set at the turn of the century, that were possibly slaves, you know, all of these very specific roles rooted in Black trauma, essentially.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing about Hamilton was that it was really, it wasn't the first time, but it was one of the times where I got to see Black joy, or I got to see people that look like me joyful. In a way that I was like, I know what that looks like. I know what that feels like. I know what that essence is. I can give that and more.
Wow.
Especially when I saw Oak play Hercules Mulligan. It was one of those things where I was like, I know exactly what that is. And it wasn't a matter of I am that, or I'm just as good as that, or I understand that energy. Yeah. I understand that flow. I understand how that contributes to the machine that they're trying to go for. I understood the function of it within the show. And it was very easy for me to tap into. And it's something that I still think about all the time. And I kind of laughed. I chuckled to myself and I'm like, wow, like that's a really insane thing to have seen that original cast and to be able to go, not even to go, oh, I hope I can do that. It's to go, oh, I know I can do that. Oh, I know I can be a part of that.
Yeah.
And it was a really amazing thing. But what makes it even more amazing is that it opened up these conversations about what does it really mean? What does race really look like on Broadway?
Yeah.
You know, and on top of that, it began the conversation. And I think there were inklings that it ended it, but it was like, no. Because even within Hamilton, as perfect as we are, we have things that we need to fix. We have things that we can build upon because there are still, it didn't even open up the conversation. It simply made a crack. And then all these other shows came in because out of nowhere, from a financial model perspective, diversity became popular. And that's when the real conversation started happening.
Yeah. I was talking to a guy, he was a guest on here. He wrote a book called Redneck Revelry, which was about what led to the election of Trump. And it goes back 46 years. And it's a fascinating look. It has very little to do with Trump and more about what was the culture building through that led there. Very analytical look, which I liked because there's a lot of assumptions right now.
Right.
But one of the things that was brought up to that was that so much of the conversation around what was going on is more of an economic question than some of the other things. And I love what you said there about, now it's feasible, not feasible. Now it's sexy to do these kind of Hamiltons because there's money there. Oh, we can make money this.
We can make money out of this.
So, I look at it and I think it's fascinating because let's use Hamilton as the baseline. Then the question becomes, what does it look to write? What does it look to perform? What does it look to, beyond just a Black voice, beyond just a writing for a specific ethos or culture? Broadway has a culture that is vastly different than a Hollywood culture, as vastly
Very
different than a TV culture. And I would pose the question that Hamilton is rewriting the ethos of what can be done, what 100%. Should be done, and how you write, how you produce, how you act in something that is much more rich than what's ever been allowed in that culture before. So as a person that's in that sees the behind the scenes, that sees that experience, what are your hopes? What are the things that you dream to see? What are the stories that you want to see told? As this is explored as possible, as this is explored as profitable, which I think is even more powerful because it's like people want this. Wake up. It's time to tell that story.
Yeah. I want to see more at the hands of the people the stories are about. I want to see more creative teams of color, more creative teams, more Black creative teams. I want to see more Black women-led creative projects. I want to see more equity. I think right now, and it's like I said, Hamilton just barely cracked the surface of what the conversation was because it then opened into the world of what does it really look like to produce works about people of color and what does it mean and what are the actual litigations of how we handle it? Because it can't just be about what it looks like on image. Like we can't look at Leslie Odom, Lynn, Oak, David, Anthony, Renee, and Pippa and go, yay, we did it, because I see them. What's happening behind the scenes? Because behind the scenes, there was still loads of white people in the crew, in the creative team, in the producing staff. And so we now have to expand as much as we can and build upon that so that now equity isn't just about what we're seeing, it's about what we're doing.
Yeah. And I would pose this, that if we just looked at the surface of the actors playing, most of them had arrived at some level of success and breakthrough in their own lives. And if we were to stop there, it would be celebrating a deeper place of arrival maybe for them or success. I look at Leslie Odom Jr. I look at his music. My first introduction was his first Christmas album. That's where I heard him. And you look back, I mean, he was doing the nationwide commercials before Hamilton. He
had a guest starring role on a TV show called Smash, which is where many of us know him.
Yeah. And so you look at that and you say, well, it wasn't like a breakthrough moment for him. It was an extension of another moment of greatness. And I'd love to get him on the show. I think I have huge respect for him as an actor, as a musician, as a singer. But I would say
Oscar nominated now.
Yeah, rightfully so.
Yep.
And I look at it and I love that you bring out this question of what does diversity look like in the crew? What's diversity look like in the writing room? What's diversity look like from the production side? What does it look like from the ticket office to the back room to the all of that? Because there's empowerment in that when we say it's not just the front line, the front actor, the front face of the production.
It's not about the image that we're selling it on, and it has to come down to what is right. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that I'm constantly just looking at in every angle is like, what is right? Yeah. What is the right thing? And I think the issue is that the only thing that messes up that question is money.
Yeah.
That is the only time that we end up getting into a moral issue of how things function, because money makes the world go round. Money is the reason we do anything. And if money was taken out of the equation, there would be a lot more diversity. There would be so many more things happening. I mean, the old 80s and 90s propaganda was like, if you're going to put Black people in movie, if you're going to put any people of color, it's like, well, how much is that going to affect the bottom line? How much is that going to affect? There's a famous story that Eddie Murphy tells with Coming to America. When they were making the movie, the Paramount said you have to have one white person. It's like you can't have all black people. Like you have to have one white person. And they were like, what? And there were mega stars in that movie that they had all over, and it was still not enough. Paramount still was like, the bottom line can't be affected.
Wow.
You know, and so it always comes down to, are you doing what's right, or are you doing it for diversity's sake, or are you doing it for the bottom line? Like that those are the questions that I want to continually have. I want to get into the nitty-gritty of that, because I don't think we often consider how heavy the bottom line is considered.
Yeah, I love that. We are going to take a break right here, and in a moment, we'll continue the conversation with today's guest, Fergie Philippe. The last couple years have been absolutely crazy. I hope that even though COVID changed your life and my life and all of our lives, that you took that time to reflect, to think about your dreams, your ideas, the things that you're doing in your life, and to refocus. If you did, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your story on what you've done, the changes you've made in your life. Maybe it's with your family. Maybe it's with your job. Maybe it's with a little side hustle that you're chasing. I would love to hear what you've been working on. Drop me a note, hello@jumblethink.com, and let me know what you've been doing, what you've been working on to take those dreams and ideas during this COVID season and make them a reality. Drop me that note, hello@jumblethink.com. Now let's return to today's conversation. COVID comes along.
Mm-hmm.
COVID is the great equalizer of shutting everything down. We all got shut down.
We all got shut down.
I haven't been in New York in over a year.
Mm.
For me, that since I've been back on the East Coast, I lived on the West Coast most of my adult life.
Right.
I can't think of a time in the last several years where I've been away from New York that long. Now we look at what's going on with Broadway. Broadway's been like just slaughtered with this.
Yeah.
I have a good friend named Donnie Zolden who's been on the show several times, and he owns a comedy club on the Upper West Side. They've just been decimated. Comedy club shut down.
Wow.
Something unique happened. Broadway Podcast Network's really been giving a voice to what's happening in Broadway, on Broadway, telling stories, continuing to have narrative, continuing to do unique projects. Some people might look and say, what in the world is a Muppet show doing on a Broadway thing? Tell us what Broadway Podcast Network is. Tell us how in the world that becomes the home of the Muppets. I think it's beautiful, but...
Oh, man. Broadway Podcast Network is great. I actually got introduced to them back in the summer because I was starting another podcast, and my friend Nick Walker, who played Burr on our tour, and now he's playing Otis Williams in Ain't Too Proud on Broadway. And he has his own podcast called Little Justice. And he was telling me that he was starting a new podcast with Broadway Podcasting Network. He was like, these guys are great. And, you know, they're really excited about getting all kinds of different stories to come on their network and all of these different things. And I was kind of like, okay, cool, fun, you know, awesome.
Good
and
for
I kind
you,
of was
kind
just
of thing.
like, yeah. I was kind of just like,
go do that.
Yeah, I was like, have fun, you know, that sounds great. And I did like a town hall event for his podcast, and we just had a lot of fun. And the guy and Alan, who was producing it, was such a sweet guy. I guest starred on another podcast called the Wrong Cat Died, which is all about Cats, the musical, which I love that show so much. Hopefully
it does never mention the movie though.
No, we have to talk about the movie. It's just so I if anyone knows me, I bask in things that are terrible. I love terrible things. And I mean, everything about cats, I have such a passion for, but that's another conversation. But Broadway Podcast Network produces that, and I had a great time on that show. And so I was kind of thinking maybe that other podcast I was doing eventually failed after the 4th episode because I was producing it, I was, hosting it, I was doing everything, I was editing, and I was just like, it's too much. And so I gave up. And in the beginning of the year, Disney Plus announces that they're releasing The Muppet Show, which if you're a diehard Muppet fan, like, you know, you've been waiting for seasons 4 and 5 of The Muppet Show for the past 12 years, because they stopped releasing them on DVD after the 3rd season for some reason. And they announced they're going to do that. And I was saying to myself, oh, you know, it'd be great, man. I love West Wing Weekly. I love The Office Ladies. I love these shows where I can like pair my TV watching with my podcast experience. Like I love when I'm able to do that. Mm-hmm. A couple of days go by and I was like, oh, shoot. I got to do it. And it's not like other people aren't doing it. And I'm sure their podcasts are like fantastic. But I remember saying to myself, like, and the moment that it entered my head, it didn't leave. I was like, oh, dang it. Okay. So I asked Nick, I said, hey, can you connect me? And he connected me. And the day of, I started freaking out. I was like, oh no, they're going to laugh at me. Who wants to hear about the Muppets? Oh my God, they're going to think I'm crazy. But I can't remember if my girlfriend was like, you have to commit, or if I was like it, but somebody in our relationship was like, you can't back out. Like, just pitch. If they hate it, the worst they can do is laugh at you and say, sorry, no, we're good. Yeah. So I said, okay, fine. So I walked in and I was like, hey, or not walked in, it was a Zoom, but I kind of, started talking and I started pitching. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of me saying it, I was like, you sound like an idiot. What is wrong with you? Nobody cares, dude. This is Broadway. Why do they care? And when I look back at the screen, they both have the hugest smile on their face. And Dory Bernstein, who runs Broadway Podcast Network, goes, so, before I was, running Broadway Podcast Network, I actually worked with Walt Disney Imagineering. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I love Imagineering. I was like, that's really amazing. And she goes, yeah, one of the projects I worked on was Muppet Vision 3D. Wow. And I worked with Jim Henson. Wow. And I was dumbfounded. I could not believe.
You're trying to pick your mouth off the floor.
Yeah, no, like all of my teeth had fallen out. I was like, oh my God. And she goes, we have to do this show. Oh, and she greenlit it right on the spot. And I was just like, and then she hung up and I was like, oh crap, now I got to actually do it. I freaked out. But what makes the reason why Muppets and Broadway Podcast Network together work and why it's actually essential for me, there is such a varied and deep connection and history of the Muppets and musical theater. Yeah. Jim Henson was such an artistic appreciator. For those who don't know, he's the creator of the Muppets. He played Kermit the Frog. He played Ernie. He played Dr. Teeth, Rolf, all these different characters. But he was such an artistic force and he loved theater. He loved musical theater. He was very, what's the term? His taste was very eclectic and he knew good musical theater. So there are songs from Cabaret, from Chicago, from Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, from Les Mis, from Disney movies. There are all of these different musical theater pieces. Hello, Dolly. Like, there are so many different musical theater pieces that are incorporated into The Muppet Show. And The Muppet Show, the way that it's performed, because it was filmed in London, is very much in the style of kind of the British Hall, kind of British vaudeville type of show. And so there's musical numbers out the wazoo. There's constantly singing and dancing. The whole thing is about the Muppets singing and dancing. And so it's a naturally musical piece. The Muppets and music go together like peanut butter and jelly. Like, that's just how it is. And on top of that, the Muppet Show, what was really amazing was that the Muppet Show had so many musical theater guest stars on its show. Liza Minnelli, Ben Vereen, Joel Grey, they had great number of people who were making careers on the stage first before film and coming over, and making, some cases their TV debut. Yeah. And I think that what was really incredible about that was that there was obviously such a respect for the craft of theater and for the craft of musical theater and Broadway in general. And there were so many tributes to Broadway and so many tributes to stage performing in general. And so it was just a natural connection. And I find myself making Broadway connections all of the time. time and making connections. And there are so many Broadway people who were inspired by the Muppets. So many people got into Broadway because the first time they heard Broadway was in the movie The Muppets Take Manhattan. There are so many connections between people who grew up with the Muppets and decided the Muppets are the reason they got into theater in the first place. So it goes together unbelievably, even though the initial thought might not be that.
Yeah. So you're looking at each episode one at a time in each of the episodes you do. You're mirroring kind of the release pattern that Disney Plus has done.
Well, that's a complicated story. If you listen to the podcast, you know that's a complicated story. But yes, essentially the goal is that I'm going in chronological order of the episodes. At first, it was the production shooting schedule, then it was the release schedule, but then Disney Plus changed the order, and so now it's back on, which I believe is the production schedule, or at least it's when the way the order of the DVD is. That's what I'll say. It is the order that the DVD released the episodes for the first 3 seasons. Seasons 4 and 5, I actually don't know. I'll actually have to look that up and give more information on that. But yeah, I go episode by episode and I review it, and I basically just talk about all the things I loved, all the things that I think are interesting. Especially the first season is really interesting right now because there are so many risks they're taking. Mm-hmm. There are so many different choices that they are making. They are trying things. Like, it is a true pass or fail. Who knows? They are just trying things and they're throwing spaghetti and just seeing what sticks, and so it's really interesting to kind of go back and see their first attempts at certain characters, and it's like, oh, that didn't hit the mark, but I see why they went in that direction. That's actually really funny. That's why that ends up going into this, thinking about the different builds of the character. Fozzie and Miss Piggy look so different in the first season compared to the other seasons, and so those are the kind of things I talk about.
I've listened to, you have 2 episodes out so far.
Yeah.
I listened to the first one, and one of the things that I found interesting about it was that in the canon of Muppets, and I never thought about this because you think about it even as an adult, kind of as a kid, I think, because it's where we were when we watched these things, right?
Right.
And so what you pointed out, and I thought was really powerful, was that you were saying, in the canon of the Muppets, they don't start with an episode 1 like you would typically think, hey, I'm so-and-so, welcome to the blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It is like they may have been doing this for 10 months. This could be the first episode. This could be 100 years into it. It's just a moment in their history.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a part of the canon, and you don't know where this sits in the timeline of Muppets. They could have a list. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because I think that often we feel like something should have a start and a finish. That, like, we watch our favorite TV show and we go, well, this was the first one, this is the last one, here's the whole story, this is the arc. Even like in something like an NCIS or something, there's an arc like, oh, these actors were here, there, and these ones weren't, and this is the story. And I just think that that's an interesting way to approach it, because they could have just said, hey, here's Kermit, here's Miss Piggy, let's introduce you to this person. But they acted like you knew. You were a part of the journey. You were a part of the ride from day one.
Yep. It's one of the things that I love about it the most, is that there is a simulation. There is a dimension where, since the dawn of time, they've been doing the Muppet Show, and to this day, they're still doing the Muppet Show.
Yeah.
And that's also what makes it hilarious, because the fact of the matter is the Muppets are not good at putting up the Muppet Show. They are actually categorically terrible at it.
Yeah.
And that's also what makes it heartwarming, because every episode is them trying their absolute best to do a good show, and it just never goes right.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's always been this way, and that it will always be this way, there's also a comfort in that, I think. And I think that's part of why the Muppets can bring comfort to people, because there's no straying from the form of that. That there was a 2015 Muppet series on ABC that only lasted 1 season, and fans panned it. Fans absolutely, abhorred it, because it was such a departure from the form that the Muppets were created in. And I liked the show. I understood why most people were very angry with it, because there's certain functions that the Muppets work in. They work in live performance, they work in putting on a show, they work in improv, they work in certain things, but the Muppets that version was trying to play off of the success of Modern Family and The Office in this mockumentary style, which just isn't a style that the Muppets lend themselves to. And it became personal. And, you know, there was all of these there was some really cool character development moments. You know, Kermit and Piggy had some really interesting and dramatic scenes about their relationship. And, you know, Miss Piggy had a lot of identity crisis issues throughout the whole show that kind of gave her character a little bit more volume as opposed to just the crazy woman. But part of the reason the Muppets work is because they are tropes, because they are, you know, these caricatures. And I think that there was always a comfort in that. There was a comfort in the fact that you always knew what was going to happen. You always knew Fozzie was going to be bad. You always knew that when Fozzie got out there, Statler and Waldorf were going to heckle him. You always knew that whenever Piggy came to Kermit was going to get annoyed. There is something about that people are really clinging on to. And I think that, unfortunately, it is what we're missing from the Muppets today, is that we're missing that sense of comfort. And we're getting all of these different scenarios where we're seeing them in these different situations that it is kind of like, we don't need to see them in these kind of different situations. The comfort is to know who they are. And that's circling back is that's why it's so genius the way they had that first episode, or the way they shot Juliet Prowse is the first episode they shot. The fact that I almost believe there is intentional design of the show when Kermit's first line is "Welcome to another night of the Muppet Show." Yep. It is intentional for you to believe that we've always been here. You're always welcome here, and you can come and go as you please. And it sounds trivial because it's the Muppets, but there really is something profound in that to me. And I think it's why it's blown up. It's one of the things that's trending the most on Disney Plus right now, because there is a comfort in it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
As we wrap up this segment, how can people find and connect with you? How can they find and connect with this show? How can they keep up to date with everything you're working on?
Oh, that's great. So the first thing that I want everybody to do is go to bpn.fm, which is Broadway Podcast Network. That's where all the different podcasts are happening. Those are my producers. It's a great network with some really great podcasts, and there's some really great conversations happening there about a range of topics and issues that are really fun. Some political, some there's a couple. There's some great ones out there. If you want to find me, you can find me at Fergsters95. That is FERGSTERS95. And that's my TikTok. That's my Twitter. That is my Instagram. And if you want to follow the Meet the Muppets pod, you can follow it at Meet the Muppets. That's at MEETTHEMUPPETS. And that's on Instagram only.
Here's the deal. We make it easy. It's in the episode notes. You don't even have to type it. You just click it. It goes there. It opens. It does magical things. Don't work for it. Just go do it. Click that follow. Click that subscribe. Or if you're on Apple Podcasts, click follow now. They don't know what they're doing over there.
Yes, follow.
Super cool show. I'm excited. I'm listening. I'm excited to see how this journey unfolds. We're going to take a break here. When we come back, it is our rapid fire questions. We'll be right back. There is a lot going on here at Jumblethink, and we want to make sure that you are in the loop. So head on over to jumblethink.com, where you can sign up for the email newsletter, or you can click those magical links to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, or you can subscribe to the show. Everything's right there, so go connect and never miss another episode of Jumblethink. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions.
Levez seulement le bras pour mettre l'aiguille sur le disque.
We are back with Fergie. All right, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I am as ready as I can be.
All right, as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A puppeteer for the Muppets.
What's one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Sit down and just think about what is the next step I can take today or tomorrow.
What is one change you would like to see in the world?
Patience. More patience.
What do you want your legacy to be?
If anything, I just want my legacy to be that I did as much as I could to help as many people as I could.
Where do you find inspiration?
Everywhere. Everywhere, but mostly Jim Henson.
Yeah.
Truly.
What is one book you think every dreamer should read?
Every dreamer should read, I'm sorry, Jim Henson, the biography by Brian J. Jones. I really think that is a fantastic biography. Yeah, I think that's a great book to read for everybody. I think there's some really great advice in there.
How do you define success?
I like this question. Success is when you are able to do what you love and you are also able to create space so that you are joyful outside of it.
What is one trend you are currently excited about?
The Muppets coming back. The Muppets being back in the zeitgeist. Yes.
What's one thing you wish you would have known when you first started out?
I wish I would have known that success looks like a million different things and that I'm enough without it.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
Lord Jesus, I honestly would probably be working terribly hard to try to become a zoologist or a marine biologist.
Oh, that's cool. And our final rapid fire question, what is one dream you are still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
I really would love to create my own children's show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I would really love to write, produce, direct, and cast my friends and with puppets, obviously, and do like a old-fashioned like 90s puppet children's show for like PBS or something. That would be a dream.
I don't know. I think if Jim Henson, if your team is listening right now, you need to call up Fergie.
Hey, I got pitches. Don't you worry.
We always like to leave our guests have the final thought for our conversation. What do you want to leave all of us with today?
It will come back. I know it seems scary, and there's all these conversations about we won't come back. It's a new normal, but it will come back. It will come back in the way that feels at least similar to what we saw before. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with others. We're all doing our best, even if it doesn't look like it.
Fergie, thank you so much for taking time and joining us here on Jumble Think. Also coming out right around the same time as this conversation, you'll find an article in Podcast Magazine where we continue talking about the podcast that Fergie's working on with the Muppets and much more. So check out that article too. Fergie, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, man.
Once again, I want to thank Fergie for joining us here on Jumble Think. What an honor to have him on. The links to what he's working on are in the episode notes. Go check it out. I also want to challenge you today. Sometimes our dreams start as a child. Sometimes our dreams are birthed when we're an adult. But no matter where you are, your dreams and ideas matter, that you are significant. And that's my challenge to you today. Maybe you need to spend some time today revisiting those childhood dreams. Maybe you need to spend some time revisiting the dreams of today. No matter what it is, find those dreams, find those things that you're created to create, and go do them. Now it's your turn to get out there, to dream big, and to change the world around you.
Et les jambes légèrement espacées. Étirez-vous doucement, mais complètement. En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.